Most women never sit down and consciously decide to test a man. It doesn't happen the way social media often describes it. There's usually no secret strategy, no calculated game, no checklist hidden behind her behavior. Most of the time, it happens emotionally, instinctively, because attraction is emotional before it is logical. And when a woman starts feeling emotionally drawn to someone, something deeper begins happening beneath the surface. Her nervous system quietly starts asking questions her mind may not even fully understand yet. Can I trust this person emotionally? Will he stay grounded when things become uncertain? Is his confidence real or temporary? Welcome back to the Female Mind Lab. One of the biggest misunderstandings in modern relationships is that men often interpret emotional testing as manipulation, while many women don't even realize they're doing it. What looks like mixed signals from the outside is often emotional observation happening subconsciously. A woman may suddenly become slightly distant after intense connection, not because she lost attraction, but because closeness creates vulnerability, and vulnerability naturally activates emotional caution. She may take longer to reply one day. She may disagree more directly. She may stop reassuring him temporarily. She may become quieter and observe more than she speaks. And in those small moments, she's often paying attention to one thing. How does he handle emotional uncertainty? Because emotionally reactive behavior tells people more than smooth words ever can. Some men immediately panic when emotional energy shifts slightly. Their tone changes, their patience disappears. They start chasing reassurance, over-explaining, double-texting, becoming passive-aggressive. Suddenly, the calm confidence they projected in the beginning starts collapsing under small emotional pressure. And for many women, that shift matters deeply. Because emotional safety is not built during perfect moments. Anyone can appear confident when affection is easy. Anyone can seem emotionally mature when everything feels secure. But uncertainty reveals emotional structure. A woman may unconsciously test emotional safety simply by pulling back slightly and watching whether a man remains emotionally centered or becomes controlled by fear. And the truth is, most women are not looking for a perfect man. They are looking for emotional steadiness. A man who doesn't emotionally collapse the moment connection becomes unpredictable. A man who can tolerate emotional ambiguity without becoming controlling, needy, cold, or emotionally unstable. Because deep attraction is not only about chemistry, it's about nervous system trust. Think about how many people today have experienced inconsistency, ghosting, betrayal, emotional manipulation, temporary affection, or relationships that changed overnight. People carry those experiences silently into new connections. So when a woman begins developing feelings, her subconscious naturally becomes alert. Not because she wants problems, but because emotional attachment always carries risk. And this is why many women unconsciously create small moments of uncertainty without realizing it. Not to hurt a man, but to understand him. Because beneath attraction, beneath chemistry, beneath flirting and excitement, there is often a quieter emotional question hiding underneath it all. Who does this man become when things stop feeling easy? At first, confidence can feel magnetic. The way a man speaks, the way he carries himself, his certainty, his charisma, his calm energy in social situations. It creates attraction quickly. But over time, something more important quietly takes its place. Consistency. Because confidence impresses the eyes, while consistency calms the nervous system. And many women unconsciously begin testing this long before they even realize they're doing it. A man may appear emotionally solid during the early stages of attraction. He texts consistently. He listens carefully. He feels attentive, patient, emotionally available. But once emotional investment deepens, subtle pressure begins revealing whether that version of him is sustainable. And this is where female psychology becomes deeply misunderstood. Sometimes a woman asks difficult questions not because she wants conflict, but because she's watching emotional stability. Sometimes she revisits sensitive conversations because she's observing emotional maturity. Sometimes she changes her emotional energy slightly just to see whether his behavior changes with it. Because people trust patterns more than promises. Welcome back to the Female Mind Lab. One of the deepest emotional fears many women carry is not imperfection, it's inconsistency. A man who is caring one week and emotionally distant the next, emotionally available until commitment appears, patient until boundaries are introduced, loving until stress enters his life. That unpredictability creates emotional anxiety, and the human mind naturally searches for predictability before full emotional surrender can happen. This is why women often pay attention to tiny details men overlook completely. Does his tone change after disagreement? Does he become colder when he feels less in control? Does his attention disappear once he feels emotionally secure? Does he remain respectful when frustrated? Because attraction is not just built through excitement, it's built through emotional reliability over time. A woman may deeply like a man and still unconsciously create small emotional situations simply to see whether his emotional presence remains stable under pressure. And many men fail these moments without understanding why. Not because they lacked attraction, not because they weren't alpha enough, but because their emotional consistency disappeared once uncertainty entered the connection. One of the most psychologically revealing moments in relationships is when emotional comfort gets interrupted. Anyone can be attentive during the honeymoon phase, but what happens after stress, after misunderstanding, after emotional distance, after life becomes less emotionally convenient? That's where trust is either strengthened or weakened. And interestingly, women often notice emotional inconsistency faster than men realize. Not always consciously, but emotionally. A slight withdrawal in energy, delayed effort, changes in affection, irritation replacing patience. These subtle emotional shifts communicate far more than words, because human beings are emotionally pattern recognition creatures, and when patterns suddenly change, the nervous system notices. This is why many women unconsciously test consistency instead of confidence. Confidence can sometimes be performance, but consistency is much harder to fake over time. It reveals character, it reveals emotional discipline, and most importantly, it reveals whether a man's emotional presence is real, or only temporary when things feel easy. One of the hardest truths about human relationships is that people rarely believe words as deeply as they believe reactions, because reactions happen before performance has time to prepare itself. A person can carefully control what they say. They can present confidence, emotional intelligence, maturity, patience. But the moment emotional pressure appears, the real emotional structure underneath often reveals itself automatically. And many women unconsciously understand this without being able to explain it logically. Welcome back to the Female Mind Lab. This is why small emotional moments inside relationships often become far more psychologically important than men realize. A woman may casually disagree with a man's opinion and quietly observe his response, not because the topic itself matters that much, but because emotional reactions expose hidden insecurities. Does he become defensive immediately? Does he feel personally attacked by disagreement? Does he suddenly withdraw affection because his ego feels bruised? Or can he remain emotionally composed without needing control? These moments matter because attraction is deeply connected to emotional safety, and emotional safety cannot exist where emotional volatility constantly lives beneath the surface. Sometimes a woman may take longer to respond to a message. Sometimes she may become temporarily distant. Sometimes her attention shifts toward work, stress, friends, or her own emotional world. And in those moments, many men unintentionally reveal things they were trying to hide. Neediness, fear of abandonment, possessiveness, emotional dependency, control disguised as care. What makes this psychologically fascinating is that most of these reactions are not intentional. They happen automatically because uncertainty activates unresolved emotional fears. That's why emotional reactions are so revealing. They bypass rehearsed identity. A man may genuinely believe he's emotionally secure until emotional tension enters the relationship. Then suddenly, his mood becomes controlled by response times, attention levels, reassurance, or validation. And women often feel this emotional shift immediately, not through logic, through energy, through tone, behavior, pressure, emotional atmosphere, because human beings constantly read emotional signals beneath words. This is why some women unconsciously create emotional friction without realizing it. A small challenge, a delayed reply, a disagreement, a boundary, not necessarily to manipulate, but because reactions reveal character faster than comfort does. Comfort hides emotional weaknesses, pressure exposes them. And ironically, the men who react the least emotionally are often the ones women trust the most emotionally, not because they are cold, but because they remain internally stable. A grounded man does not panic every time emotional energy changes slightly. He doesn't interpret every moment of distance as rejection. He doesn't lose emotional control the moment things stop feeling predictable. That emotional steadiness feels safe, and safety is one of the deepest foundations of attraction. Because when a woman feels that a man can handle emotional uncertainty without collapsing into anger, desperation, insecurity, or control, something powerful happens psychologically. She begins relaxing emotionally around him. She stops feeling like she must constantly manage his emotions. And slowly, without even realizing it, trust begins replacing emotional caution. Because in the end, reactions always reveal what words try to protect. Not every emotional test comes from manipulation. Sometimes it comes from pain that was never fully healed. And this is where relationships become emotionally complicated in ways most people never talk about honestly. Because when someone has been hurt deeply before, their nervous system changes. Even if they appear strong, even if they smile easily, even if they genuinely want love again, past emotional experiences quietly shape future emotional behavior. Welcome back to the Female Mind Lab. A woman who has experienced betrayal, inconsistency, abandonment, emotional neglect, or dishonesty often enters new relationships carrying invisible emotional survival patterns she may not consciously recognize. And sometimes those patterns look like testing. She may suddenly pull away after moments of closeness, not because she lost feelings, but because intimacy activates fear. She may overanalyze small changes in behavior, question sincerity, become emotionally hot and cold, need reassurance one moment and distance the next. From the outside, it can feel confusing. A man may think, if she likes me, why does she sometimes act uncertain? But psychologically, attraction and fear often exist together, especially for people who learned through experience that emotional attachment can become painful without warning. This is why some women unconsciously create emotional situations to protect themselves emotionally before they become too vulnerable. They may challenge consistency, observe reactions, watch how a man behaves when things are emotionally uncomfortable. Because part of them is quietly asking, what happens when this relationship stops feeling perfect? Will he become cold? Will he disappear emotionally? Will he become controlling? Will his affection suddenly change? People who have experienced emotional instability before often become highly sensitive to emotional unpredictability afterward. And many times they don't even realize how much their past is influencing their present behavior. That's why emotionally intelligent men understand something important. Not every difficult emotional moment is an attack against them personally. Sometimes it's unresolved fear expressing itself indirectly. A woman who fears abandonment may unintentionally create distance first. A woman who fears betrayal may become hyper-aware of small inconsistencies. A woman who once trusted the wrong person may struggle to fully relax emotionally, even when she genuinely wants connection. And this creates one of the saddest relationship dynamics in modern dating. People longing for love, while simultaneously protecting themselves from it. Because the deeper feelings become, the more emotionally exposed people feel. And exposure can feel dangerous for someone whose trust was once broken unexpectedly. This is why emotional maturity matters so much in relationships. A reactive man often interprets these moments as disrespect or manipulation immediately. But a grounded man pays attention to the emotional psychology underneath the behavior. He understands that human beings are emotional creatures carrying histories, wounds, fears, insecurities, and survival instincts into every relationship they enter. That understanding creates patience, not weakness, not tolerance for toxic behavior, but emotional awareness. Because sometimes the woman testing emotional safety the most is the woman who once felt emotionally unsafe with the wrong person. And beneath all the confusion, distance, overthinking, and emotional inconsistency, there is often a quieter emotional truth hiding underneath it all. She's not only afraid of losing the relationship, she's afraid of reliving the pain she thought she had already escaped. Ironically, the men who naturally pass emotional tests are usually the men who don't spend their lives trying to pass them. Because emotional strength cannot be fully performed. Sooner or later, pressure exposes what is real. And this is something many women feel instinctively. Welcome back to the Female Mind Lab. A man who constantly studies how to respond, how to win, or how to maintain control often becomes trapped inside performance. His behavior starts revolving around strategy instead of authenticity. And people can feel that emotionally, not always consciously, but deeply. Because there's a difference between calmness and rehearsed calmness. One comes from emotional security. The other comes from fear of losing control. The men who create the deepest emotional trust are usually not perfect men. They are emotionally grounded men. Men whose behavior remains stable even when emotions become complicated. When communication slows down, they don't instantly panic. When disagreement happens, they don't collapse into anger or ego. When emotional tension appears, they don't desperately chase validation to restore their sense of worth. And that emotional steadiness becomes incredibly attractive because it feels rare in a world where so many people are emotionally reactive. A grounded man does not need to dominate every emotional situation to feel secure. He listens without feeling weak. He stays calm without becoming emotionally unavailable. He respects boundaries without interpreting them as rejection. And most importantly, his emotional identity does not completely depend on another person's temporary mood or attention. That creates safety. Because one of the most exhausting experiences for many women is feeling responsible for managing a man's emotional stability. Constant reassurance, constant emotional regulation, constant fear of triggering insecurity, anger, withdrawal, or emotional collapse. Over time, that emotional pressure destroys attraction, but emotional steadiness creates the opposite effect. It allows a woman to emotionally relax, to stop over-monitoring the connection, to stop feeling like every emotional fluctuation will create chaos. And this is why many women unconsciously feel drawn toward men who seem internally secure rather than emotionally performative. Not because those men are emotionally detached, but because they are emotionally centered. There's a major difference. Emotionally detached people avoid vulnerability. Emotionally centered people can experience vulnerability without losing themselves inside it. That energy feels calm, reliable, safe. And deep down, most women are not searching for perfection. They are searching for emotional reliability in an emotionally unpredictable world. Someone whose care does not disappear during stress. Someone whose patience survives discomfort. Someone whose identity remains stable, whether the relationship feels easy or difficult. Because real emotional masculinity is not loud dominance. It's emotional self-control under uncertainty. It's the ability to remain respectful without becoming weak, confident without becoming arrogant, present without becoming emotionally dependent. And without realizing it, many women naturally test for these qualities through everyday emotional moments, not because they want games, but because their subconscious is trying to answer one final emotional question before fully opening their heart. Can this person protect emotional peace? Or will loving them eventually become emotional chaos? I hope this video helped you understand relationships and human emotions from a deeper perspective. If you enjoy this kind of psychological content, stay connected with the Female Mind Lab, and I'll see you in the next video.